Good evening, my friend. Tonight, you are leaving the modern world behind. The constant sound of traffic slowly fades away. The glow of phone screens disappears. The busy schedules, endless messages, and crowded streets become distant memories. For the next little while, none of those things matter anymore. Instead, you find yourself standing beside the calm waters of the Mediterranean Sea. Take a slow breath. The air is cool and fresh. It carries the scent of salt, wild herbs, blooming flowers, and ancient olive trees. Gentle waves roll toward the shore before quietly slipping back into the sea. Above you, the sky is beginning to brighten as the first light of dawn reaches the eastern horizon. You have traveled back nearly 4,000 years. The island beneath your feet is Crete. At this moment, the people living here have no idea that future generations will remember them as one of history's greatest civilizations. To them, this is simply another ordinary morning. You begin walking along a narrow dirt path leading inland. The ground is slightly damp from the cool night air. Small birds fly from tree to tree, while insects hum quietly among patches of colorful wildflowers growing beside the road. Everything feels peaceful. Nothing moves quickly. Life follows the rhythm of nature. Ahead, smoke rises gently from the roofs of small stone houses scattered across the valley. Families have already begun preparing for another day's work. An elderly woman kneels outside her home, grinding barley into flour using two smooth stones. Beside her, fresh bread bakes inside a rounded clay oven. The warm smell drifts through the morning air. A young boy carries a wooden bucket toward a nearby spring, while his younger sister carefully follows behind him. Across the field, two oxen slowly pull a wooden plow through rich brown soil. Their owner walks quietly behind them, guiding the plow with practiced hands. Every movement feels familiar. Every task has been repeated for generations. The people understand that good harvests are never guaranteed. Some years bring plenty, others bring hardship. So every seed planted today may become the difference between comfort and hunger many months from now. As you continue your journey, the road begins filling with travelers. A fisherman walks toward the coast carrying freshly repaired nets across his shoulder. Several merchants guide donkeys loaded with enormous clay jars, sealed carefully with wax. Inside those jars are olive oil and wine, two of the island's greatest treasures. Both will soon be loaded onto ships sailing across the Mediterranean. For the people of Crete, the sea is not something to fear, it is their greatest opportunity. While many civilizations build roads across mountains and deserts, the Minoans build roads across water. Their ships travel to Egypt, to Cyprus, to the cities of the Near East, to islands scattered across the Aegean Sea. They return carrying copper, ivory, fine timber, colorful glass, precious stones, and stories from lands most people on Crete will never visit. Trade slowly transforms the island. Village after village grows larger. Families become wealthier. Craftsmen become more skilled. New ideas arrive from distant shores. The sea connects everyone. As the morning sun climbs higher into the sky, you reach the top of a gentle hill. You stop walking. Far below, standing proudly above the surrounding countryside, is the Palace of Knossos. Even from this distance it appears extraordinary. Bright red columns support upper floors decorated with colorful paintings. Wide terraces overlook green valleys filled with vineyards and olive groves. Sunlight reflects from pale stone walls, making the palace seem almost golden. You notice something unusual almost immediately. There are no enormous defensive walls surrounding the palace. No giant towers, no deep moats, no heavy gates built for war. Instead, Knossos appears open, welcoming, almost peaceful. Future historians will debate this mystery for centuries. Some believe the powerful Minoan navy protected the island from invasion. Others think the civilization simply enjoyed an unusually peaceful age. Whatever the reason, the people living here do not expect enemies to appear every morning. They expect merchants, builders, farmers, artists. As you continue toward the palace, the road grows busier. Potters carry stacks of freshly fired bowls toward the marketplace. Carpenters transport long cedar beams imported from distant forests. Farmers arrive with baskets overflowing with olives, onions, figs, grapes, and herbs. Everyone seems to know exactly where they are going, yet no one appears rushed. There is work to do, but there is also patience. Finally, you reach the entrance of Knossos. Two guards stand quietly beneath painted columns, bronze spears resting comfortably in their hands. They greet arriving merchants with calm expressions before allowing them to pass. You follow them through the entrance. Cool air immediately replaces the warmth outside. Stone corridors stretch before you. Open courtyards allow sunlight to pour deep into the palace. Fresh air moves naturally through carefully designed passageways. Everywhere you look, people are working. Potters shape clay. Metal workers polish bronze. Artists prepare brilliant blue and deep red paints. Servants carry baskets filled with food toward busy kitchens. Children laugh somewhere above as pigeons fly between rooftops. The palace feels alive, not because of soldiers, but because of ordinary people quietly building an extraordinary civilization. And as you step deeper into Knossos, you cannot help feeling that you have entered one of the most remarkable places the ancient world has ever known. You pause near the entrance of the great courtyard, allowing your eyes to adjust to the scale of the palace before you. The more you look, the more details begin to reveal themselves. Knossos is not a fortress built to intimidate strangers. It feels more like a living city, carefully organized around open spaces, fresh air, and sunlight. Every corridor leads somewhere important, and every room serves a purpose. The smooth stone beneath your feet has been polished by countless footsteps over many generations. Merchants, craftsmen, priests, farmers, children, and rulers have all walked these same paths long before you arrived. The palace is already fully awake. From one direction comes the steady rhythm of wooden hammers striking bronze. From another comes the gentle sound of spinning pottery wheels. Somewhere nearby, women laugh quietly while carrying woven baskets filled with herbs and fresh fruit toward the kitchens. The smells change with every few steps. Warm bread, fresh olives, honey, cedar wood, burning charcoal, wet clay. The entire palace feels alive with quiet industry. You begin walking toward the pottery workshop.
Inside, several craftsmen work in complete concentration. A spinning wheel turns beneath the hands of an older potter whose movements are so smooth that they almost seem effortless. A large lump of clay slowly rises into the shape of an elegant storage jar. Beside him sits a young apprentice. The boy studies every movement carefully before placing his own hands upon another spinning wheel. His first attempt collapses. The master simply smiles. He gently reshapes the clay and silently demonstrates the movement once more. No anger, no shouting, only patience. Knowledge here is passed from one generation to the next through observation, repetition, and time.
As the first light of another morning slowly spreads across the island of Crete, you awaken to the familiar sound of waves meeting the shore. The palace behind you is still quiet. Only a few servants have begun moving through the corridors, carrying fresh water from the wells before the rest of the city awakens. The air is cool. A thin layer of mist hangs over the valley below, softening the outlines of vineyards and olive groves stretching toward the distant mountains. For a few peaceful moments, the island seems completely still. Then, little by little, life begins again. A rooster calls from a nearby farm. Goats wander out from their stone shelters. Smoke rises from dozens of chimneys as families prepare the first meal of the day. You begin walking toward the eastern side of Knossos, where one of the busiest roads on the island leads toward the harbor. Even before reaching the coast, you can hear it. The sound of wood striking wood, the creaking of ropes, men calling to one another across the docks. The harbor is already alive. Dozens of ships rest beside long wooden piers, their sails lowered after returning during the night. Others are being prepared for another voyage across the Mediterranean. Sailors inspect ropes carefully, replacing worn sections before they can fail at sea. Carpenters repair damaged planks using cedar brought from distant forests. Young apprentices carry buckets of thick black pitch used to waterproof the hulls. Every person has a task. Every task matters. A successful voyage depends upon hundreds of small details completed correctly. You walk slowly along the docks. The smell here is unlike anywhere else on the island. Salt water mixes with fresh timber, fish, olive oil, smoke, and warm sunlight reflecting from the sea. Nearby, merchants carefully supervise workers loading enormous clay jars onto a ship. Each jar is sealed with wax. Each is marked with symbols identifying its contents. Olive oil, wine, honey, perfumed oils, fine pottery wrapped carefully inside woven baskets. These products will soon travel hundreds of miles across open water. In return, the ship will return carrying copper ingots, rare stones, ivory, and luxury goods desired by wealthy families throughout Crete. Trade has become the heartbeat of the Minoan world. Without it, the island would never have grown so prosperous. As one vessel prepares to leave, its captain kneels briefly before a small shrine overlooking the harbor. He places a few fresh flowers beside a clay figurine before quietly lowering his head. No long ceremony, no dramatic speech, only a simple moment of respect. The sea has been generous, but everyone knows it can also be unforgiving. Storms appear without warning. Strong winds can drive even the finest ship onto hidden rocks. Experienced sailors understand that skill alone cannot control nature. They sail with confidence, but never with arrogance. As the morning continues, the harbor becomes even busier. A large merchant vessel from Egypt arrives beneath bright white sails. Its crew speaks a language unfamiliar to many people gathered along the docks. Yet business begins almost immediately. Gestures replace words. Weights are carefully checked. Bundles are opened. Samples are examined beneath the morning sunlight. Gold jewelry sparkles beside carved ivory. Rolls of fine linen lie beside brightly painted pottery from Crete. Although these merchants come from different civilizations, trade allows them to understand one another. The marketplace becomes a meeting place for the ancient world. You realize something remarkable. Long before modern maps, long before international borders, the Mediterranean already connected countless cultures. Ideas traveled with every ship. New farming techniques, better tools, artistic styles, religious beliefs, even stories crossed the sea, changing a little with each journey before finding new homes in distant lands. Perhaps that is one reason Minoan culture feels so unique. It does not grow in isolation. It grows through connection. Leaving the harbor behind, you follow a narrow road climbing back toward the hills. Along the way, you pass vineyards stretching across gentle slopes. Workers move carefully between long rows of grapevines. Some trim leaves. Others inspect fruit that will soon be harvested. Nearby, another group gathers olives beneath ancient trees whose twisted trunks have survived countless seasons. Nothing is hurried. The farmers understand that each harvest follows its own pace. Nature cannot be commanded, only respected. An older farmer notices your curiosity and smiles warmly. He holds up a handful of dark olives before pointing toward the palace in the distance. Without saying a word, you understand. The prosperity of Knossos begins here, not inside grand halls, not aboard magnificent ships, but in these quiet fields where ordinary people work from sunrise until sunset. Every loaf of bread, every jar of oil, every cup of wine begins with hands like theirs. As the afternoon sun slowly climbs higher into the sky, you continue your walk deeper into the countryside, unaware that hidden beneath this peaceful island, forces older than civilization itself are quietly gathering strength. The afternoon sun hangs high above Crete as you continue your journey away from the busy harbor. Behind you, the sounds of merchants, sailors, and craftsmen slowly fade until they are replaced once again by the quieter rhythm of the countryside. A gentle breeze moves across the hills, carrying the scent of wild lavender, rosemary, and warm earth. The road becomes narrower. On either side, ancient olive trees cast patches of cool shade across the dusty path. Some of these trees are already hundreds of years old. Their trunks twist and bend into strange shapes, as though each one carries the memory of countless generations that have lived beneath their branches. You pause for a moment beside one particularly enormous tree. Its roots disappear deep into the rocky ground below. Perhaps this very tree stood here when your grandparents' grandparents were children. Perhaps it will still be standing long before anyone alive today has been forgotten. That thought brings an unexpected sense of peace. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, but nature often continues quietly, almost untouched by the passing of human history. As you continue your walk, the road leads toward another small village nestled between rolling hills. Unlike the magnificent Palace of Knossos, this settlement is simple. Stone houses stand close together. Their flat roofs provide places where grain is left to dry beneath the afternoon sun. Children play with smooth stones beside narrow lanes, while elderly villagers weave baskets from freshly cut reeds. Nobody appears wealthy, yet nobody appears desperate either. Life here is built upon balance. Families grow most of what they need themselves: olives, grapes, barley. Goats provide milk. Sheep provide wool. Fishing boats return with fresh catches almost every day. Trade certainly improves life, but survival does not depend entirely upon distant markets. You pass a woman carefully spinning wool into thread using a simple spindle. Her hands move almost automatically. She hardly needs to look at her work. Years of practice have transformed difficult labor into effortless rhythm. Nearby, another family prepares cloth upon a large wooden loom standing beneath an open shelter. Bright red and deep blue threads slowly become beautiful fabric decorated with patterns inspired by waves, flowers, and birds. Even ordinary objects are made with remarkable care. Beauty is not reserved only for palaces. It exists throughout everyday life. The people of Crete seem to believe that useful things should also be beautiful. As the afternoon continues, you notice something else. The village has no great walls, no watchtowers, no heavily armed guards. Children wander freely between houses. Goats graze peacefully near open fields. Merchants arrive without fear. For generations, life on Crete has been unusually stable. The powerful Minoan fleet dominates nearby waters. Pirates rarely threaten these shores. Foreign armies seldom appear. Peace has allowed the island to prosper. But peace can sometimes create its own kind of vulnerability. Generations grow accustomed to safety. Few imagine how quickly the world can change. Continuing your walk, you eventually reach higher ground overlooking much of northern Crete. The view stretches for miles. The Palace of Knossos rises proudly from the valley below. Beyond it lies the shimmering sea. From this distance, merchant ships appear no larger than tiny white birds floating upon the blue water. Everything seems calm. Everything seems permanent. Yet beneath your feet, hidden deep below the island itself, enormous forces continue their slow work. Crete sits within a region shaped by restless pieces of the Earth's crust. The people living here know earthquakes well. Small tremors occasionally shake homes. Sometimes clay jars fall from shelves. Sometimes walls develop thin cracks that must be repaired. Beyond the northern horizon, where the sea fades gently into the evening sky, a quiet force has reached the end of its long patience. Beneath the island known today as Thera, hidden chambers of molten rock press upward through ancient stone. For generations, this restless world has remained concealed beneath layers of earth and water. No sailor crossing the Aegean can see it. No shepherd watching his flock from the hills of Crete can imagine its immense power. Yet, the earth remembers every movement, every fracture, every slow breath beneath its surface. You rest beside the harbor as dawn approaches. The first light spreads across calm waters painted in soft shades of silver and pale blue. Fishing boats prepare to leave the shore exactly as they have done countless mornings before. Nets are folded carefully. Clay jars of fresh water are loaded aboard. Sailors exchange quiet greetings, while seabirds circle overhead, waiting patiently for the day's catch. Nothing appears unusual. Far to the north, however, the sea begins to stir. Without warning, the silence breaks. The mountain at the heart of Thera erupts with unimaginable force. A column of ash, rock, and superheated gas climbs higher and higher into the sky, rising far above the clouds themselves. Daylight fades beneath a growing curtain of darkness. Lightning flashes within the towering ash cloud, illuminating swirling columns that stretch across the heavens. Entire cliffs collapse into the emptying volcanic chamber below, shaking the surrounding sea with astonishing violence. No one on Crete witnesses the first terrible moments. The distance is simply too great. Instead, they continue their ordinary morning. Merchants arrange baskets of figs and olives. Craftsmen polish bronze tools inside cool workshops. Children chase one another through palace corridors decorated with bright dolphins and graceful lilies. Priests prepare quiet ceremonies within sacred chambers scented by incense and fresh flowers. Life continues, unaware that the world beyond the horizon has already changed forever. As the hours pass, strange signs begin to appear. The northern sky loses its familiar brightness. A faint haze spreads across the distant horizon, softening the sunlight into muted shades of gray. Sailors returning from longer voyages speak of unusual clouds, unlike any storm they have ever seen. Some describe distant thunder, although the sky above them remains clear. Others notice fine particles settling upon the decks of their ships like pale dust carried by invisible winds. Few understand what they are seeing. How could they? Nothing in living memory resembles such an event. Then the sea itself begins to behave differently. Experienced fishermen pause as the water near the shoreline draws back farther than expected. Rocks usually hidden beneath the waves suddenly stand exposed beneath the morning sun. Fish flop helplessly upon wet sand, while seabirds dive eagerly toward an unexpected feast. Some people step closer, curious. Others hesitate. Animals often notice danger before humans do. Dogs become restless. Goats pull against their ropes. Birds rise together into the air, abandoning places where they had nested peacefully only moments before. Across the harbors of northern Crete, an uneasy silence slowly replaces the familiar sounds of trade and conversation. No one yet understands that the sea is taking a single enormous breath. The breath it draws before returning with overwhelming force. For a few long moments, the shoreline remains strangely quiet. You stand with the gathering crowd, watching the sea stretched farther away than anyone can remember. Boats that only moments ago floated gently now lean awkwardly against the damp seabed. Shells, smooth stones, and patches of seaweed glisten beneath the morning light. Children point with curiosity, while older fishermen exchange uncertain glances. They have spent their lives reading the moods of the Mediterranean, yet this is unlike anything they have ever known. Then, almost too quietly to notice at first, a deep sound begins to grow. It is not thunder, it is not the wind, it is something older. A low, continuous roar rises from the distant horizon, growing stronger with every heartbeat. Those nearest the water slowly lift their eyes. Far across the sea, a dark line begins to appear. At first, it seems no larger than a distant cloud. Then it grows, and grows again. The line becomes a wall. An immense surge of seawater races across the Aegean, carrying with it broken trees, shattered stone, drifting boats, and the enormous force released by the collapse of the volcanic island far to the north. The sea that had quietly retreated now returns with overwhelming power. The first waves strike the northern coast of Crete with little warning. Harbors that had welcomed traders for generations disappear beneath rushing water. Wooden piers splinter apart. Fishing vessels are lifted as though they weigh nothing at all, tossed against one another before being swept inland. Warehouses filled with grain, oil, pottery, and precious goods collapse beneath the weight of the flood. You move toward higher ground with everyone around you. People call to their families. Parents carry frightened children. Neighbors help the elderly climb rocky paths leading away from the shore. There is fear, but there is also compassion. In moments of disaster, the people of Crete do what they have always done. They help one another. The greatest palaces, built well away from the coast, remain standing. Knossos still rises proudly above the surrounding countryside. Its painted walls, elegant staircases, and graceful columns survive the first terrible day. From the palace, officials look toward the distant coastline, where columns of mist and broken debris rise into the air. Messengers arrive with confusing reports. Villages have vanished, ships have disappeared. Harbors that once connected Crete to the wider Mediterranean have been left in ruins. Days later, another challenge quietly arrives. Ash from the great eruption continues drifting across the eastern Mediterranean. Although only a thin layer reaches Crete, the skies remain hazy. Sunlight loses some of its warmth. Farmers examine their fields with concern, wondering how the changing weather may affect the coming harvest. Trade also begins to falter. For centuries, Minoan ships carried pottery, olive oil, wine, textiles, and finely crafted goods across the sea. Now many vessels have been destroyed, while others remain trapped in damaged ports. Familiar trading partners wait for ships that never arrive. Markets grow quieter. Supplies that once flowed easily across the Mediterranean become uncertain. Yet life does not end. The Minoans rebuild, stone by stone, beam by beam. They repair roads, restore workshops, and clear debris from damaged settlements. Craftsmen return to their tools. Potters shape fresh clay. Artists once again paint graceful scenes of dolphins, flowers, and dancing figures upon newly plastered walls. Their civilization has survived hardship before. Once again, they choose hope over despair. But beneath this remarkable recovery, something has changed forever. The sea that once guaranteed prosperity has become far less certain, and the balance of power across the Aegean has quietly begun to shift. The years pass quietly, almost gently. If you were to return to Crete a generation after the great eruption, you would still recognize much of the island. Olive groves continue to blanket the hillsides, their silver-green leaves whispering in the warm Mediterranean breeze. Vineyards once again produce sweet grapes beneath the summer sun. Shepherds guide their flocks across familiar mountain paths, while fishermen launch their boats each morning into waters that appear as calm and welcoming as ever. Life, as it so often does, finds its way forward. Within the Palace of Knossos, scribes continue marking clay tablets with the script now known as Linear A, a writing system that remains undeciphered even today. Officials keep careful records of grain, livestock, oil, and crafted goods. Storerooms once more fill with enormous clay jars, each patiently arranged along cool stone corridors. Bright murals still decorate palace walls, showing dolphins gliding effortlessly through blue water, lilies blooming beneath clear skies, and elegantly dressed figures taking part in ceremonies that celebrate both nature and community. Yet beneath this appearance of recovery, the foundations of Minoan power have become more fragile. The great trading network that once stretched confidently across the eastern Mediterranean no longer belongs to Crete alone. Other peoples have grown stronger. On the Greek mainland, the Mycenaeans expand their influence, building impressive fortified citadels surrounded by massive stone walls. Their ships travel farther each year, carrying merchants, craftsmen, and warriors into regions that had once been closely connected with Minoan trade. Slowly, almost unnoticed, influence begins to shift northward. The change does not happen in a single season or because of one dramatic battle. Instead, it unfolds over many decades. Damaged ports, interrupted trade, changing alliances, and the steady rise of neighboring kingdoms gradually reshape the balance of the Aegean world. Around 1450 BCE, many Minoan palace centers suffered.
Long before the great eruption changed the rhythm of the Aegean, your journey through Crete continues at a pace as gentle as the sea breeze itself. There is no need to hurry. The island seems to invite slow footsteps and quiet observation. Every valley, every hillside, and every sheltered harbor reveals another small piece of a civilization that measured its success not only by wealth, but by harmony with the land and the sea. As morning light spreads across the countryside, you leave the palace behind for a while and follow a narrow path into the fertile heart of the island. The road winds between ancient olive trees, whose twisted trunks already appear old, even to the people who care for them. Some of these trees have stood through the lifetimes of several generations. Their branches provide fruit year after year, asking only for patience, careful pruning, and the steady rhythm of the seasons. Nearby, vineyards climb gentle slopes where the soil is rich enough to nourish healthy vines despite the warm Mediterranean sun. Farmers move slowly among the rows, examining leaves, tying young shoots, and quietly discussing the weather. They understand that no harvest can be rushed. Nature keeps its own calendar, and the wisest farmers learn to follow it rather than challenge it. You notice that every household contributes to the life of the community in its own way. Some families cultivate grain, while others tend sheep or goats that graze among rocky hillsides covered with fragrant herbs. Their wool will become warm textiles. Their milk will become cheese stored for the months ahead. Nothing is wasted. Every resource is valued, because every season brings different needs. Beyond the fields, small workshops hum with quiet activity. A potter kneels beside a spinning wheel, guiding soft clay upward with practiced hands. The movement appears almost effortless. Within minutes, an ordinary lump of earth becomes a graceful vessel with smooth walls and a perfectly balanced shape. After drying beneath the warm air, it will be decorated with flowing patterns inspired by the world surrounding its maker. Unlike many neighboring cultures that favor rigid geometric designs, Minoan artists seem fascinated by movement itself. They paint curling waves, swimming dolphins, graceful octopuses stretching their arms around the surface of elegant jars. Seaweed bends gently with invisible currents. Even the simplest storage vessel reflects the living sea. You begin to understand that the ocean is far more than a source of food or trade. It has become part of the Minoan imagination. Their art does not seek to dominate nature. Instead, it quietly celebrates it. Inside another workshop, skilled metalworkers carefully heat copper and tin before combining them into bronze. Sparks rise briefly into the air before fading into silence. With stone hammers and remarkable precision, they shape knives, chisels, axes, jewelry, and delicate ceremonial objects. Every finished piece represents years of accumulated knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Knowledge itself is among the civilization's greatest treasures. Children learn by watching. Apprentices imitate experienced craftsmen. Parents teach practical skills long before they are ever spoken aloud. Little by little, each generation inherits not only tools, but wisdom earned through countless ordinary days. As the afternoon grows warmer, you return toward Knossos, where life continues with its familiar rhythm. Courtyards echo softly with conversation rather than command. Messengers walk briskly between storerooms, carrying clay tablets covered with careful symbols. Scribes press signs into damp clay using sharpened reeds, recording deliveries of grain, olive oil, wine, wool, and livestock. You pause to watch them work. The symbols are elegant and deliberate, each one carrying meaning understood by the palace administrators. Today, modern scholars call this writing Linear A, yet despite decades of study, its language remains one of archaeology's enduring mysteries. The tablets have survived, the voices behind them have not. That quiet mystery somehow makes the palace feel even more peaceful. The people speak, they laugh, they negotiate, they celebrate. But across thousands of years, only the silent clay remains to tell a small part of their story. As evening approaches once again, golden sunlight wash across the red columns of Knossos. Long shadows stretch across the stone courtyards, while swallows circle overhead in graceful arcs. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, a shepherd calls gently to his flock. From the distant harbor comes the faint sound of wooden ships settling against their moorings after another successful voyage. For the people of Crete, tomorrow promises to look very much like today. And for now, that quiet certainty feels as steady and enduring as the island itself. As darkness settles gently across the island, the pace of life slows even further. One by one, small oil lamps begin to glow inside homes, workshops, and the great palace itself. Their warm light dances softly across plastered walls, illuminating flowers, birds, and graceful sea creatures that seem almost alive in the flickering flame. You wander through the quiet streets of Knossos, where the sounds of the busy day have faded into calm conversation. Families gather together for the evening meal. Fresh bread, olives, figs, goat cheese, lentils, fish, and watered wine are shared without hurry. There is no sense of rushing toward tomorrow. The work of the day has been completed, and now the night belongs to stories, music, and rest. An elderly woman begins telling a tale that she herself learned as a child. The youngest children listen with wide, curious eyes.
The older ones already know the ending, yet they listen just as carefully. Stories are more than entertainment here. They carry memory. They preserve lessons that no written tablet can fully capture. Through spoken words, each generation quietly hands its understanding of the world to the next. Outside, the stars slowly brighten above the Mediterranean. Without the glow of modern cities, the night sky appears astonishingly clear. Thousands upon thousands of stars stretch across the heavens, reflected in the still waters surrounding Crete. Sailors study these familiar patterns carefully. During long voyages, the stars become trusted companions, helping guide ships safely between distant islands and foreign shores. For the people of Crete, the sea is not an empty space separating lands. It is a living highway. Every voyage strengthens friendships with distant communities. Ships arrive carrying copper from Cyprus, fine ivory from Egypt, precious stones from the Near East, and beautiful objects crafted by hands that have never touched the shores of Crete. In return, Minoan merchants offer finely painted pottery, woven textiles, fragrant olive oil, saffron, and carefully worked bronze tools. Every successful journey brings more than wealth. It brings ideas, new artistic styles, different religious customs, fresh techniques for building, farming, and craftsmanship. You begin to notice how naturally the Minoans absorbed influences from abroad while preserving a character that remains uniquely their own. Egyptian art may inspire certain details, yet Minoan painters continue to fill their walls with lively dolphins, leaping fish, blooming lilies, and landscapes full of movement rather than rigid formality. Nothing feels static. Even the architecture reflects this quiet sense of motion. The Palace of Knossos is unlike the heavily fortified strongholds that will later appear on mainland Greece. Instead of towering defensive walls, its design enhances open courtyards, broad staircases, light wells, and airy rooms that invite sunlight deep into the building. Fresh air circulates naturally through carefully planned spaces, cooling the palace during the warm summer months. As you explore its corridors, you discover storerooms lined with enormous clay jars known today as pithoi. Some stand taller than a person. Within them are carefully stored grain, olive oil, wine, honey, and other precious supplies gathered from communities across the island. These reserves help sustain the population during poor harvests and demonstrate the remarkable organization of Minoan society. Nearby, skilled workers inspect textiles dyed with brilliant colors extracted from plants, minerals, and even tiny sea snails. Weavers patiently transform wool and flax into fabrics so finely made that they become valued throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Every thread reflects countless hours of careful labor. In another chamber, jewelers shape delicate gold into necklaces, rings, and pendants. Their work is astonishingly precise. Tiny beads, thin wires, and intricate patterns reveal a level of craftsmanship that continues to impress archaeologists thousands of years later. Yet despite all this beauty and prosperity, the palace never feels like a place built solely for rulers.
The first rays of sunlight spread slowly across the island, touching the mountain peaks before drifting into the valleys below. Dew rests upon the leaves of olive trees, sparkling for a brief moment before disappearing into the warmth of another Mediterranean morning. You continue your quiet journey, following a well-worn path that leads away from the palace and toward the smaller villages scattered across the countryside. Here, life feels even slower. Stone houses stand close together, their thick walls protecting families from both the summer heat and the cool evenings of winter. Wooden doors remain open as neighbors greet one another while beginning the day's work. A baker removes fresh loaves from a clay oven, and the comforting scent of warm bread drifts through the narrow lanes. Children are already awake. Some help their parents feed chickens and goats. Others carry small baskets to nearby wells, carefully balancing the weight of fresh water as they return home. The older children learn practical skills almost without realizing it. A father patiently shows his son how to sharpen a bronze blade. A mother teaches her daughter how to spin wool into fine thread. Grandparents quietly supervise, offering gentle advice earned through decades of experience. No classroom exists. The entire village is the classroom. Every season teaches another lesson. Every harvest adds another page to memory. You notice how deeply connected these communities are to the natural world. They understand when migrating birds usually arrive. They recognize the changing direction of seasonal winds. They know which hillsides receive the earliest spring flowers and which valleys hold moisture long enough for late crops to flourish. To them, nature is not something to conquer, it is something to understand. The island itself becomes their greatest teacher. As you continue walking, the sound of distant laughter draws your attention toward an open field. A gathering has begun. Men and women have come together to celebrate the completion of the grain harvest. Musicians attune simple instruments while dancers prepare for the festival. There is no grand stage, no audience separated from the performers. Everyone takes part. The music begins softly. A drum marks a steady rhythm. Wooden flutes answer with gentle melodies carried by the warm breeze. Hands join together as dancers move in slow circles beneath the open sky. Their steps are graceful rather than hurried, reflecting the same flowing movement that appears again and again in Minoan art. Watching them, you begin to understand why their painters preferred curved lines over rigid ones. Their entire culture seems to celebrate motion, the rhythm of waves, the changing seasons, and the quiet harmony between people and nature. Among the crowd, skilled artisans display their latest creations. Pottery shines beneath the afternoon sun, decorated with octopuses whose graceful arms wrap naturally around curved vessels. Tiny fish swim across painted bowls. Dolphins leap through imaginary waves. Even the simplest cup carries a reminder of the sea that surrounds the island. Nearby, traders examine goods brought from distant lands. One merchant carefully unwraps beads made of brilliant blue faience from Egypt. Another presents finely carved ivory. Pieces of amber carried over countless miles through many hands catch the sunlight with a warm golden glow. Every object tells a story of distant journeys across the Mediterranean. As evening approaches Crete once more, you leave the festival behind. Music grows softer in the distance. Oil lamps begin appearing one by one across the villages, while ships returning from overseas voyages glide quietly into the island's sheltered harbors. The Minoans could not know it, but they were living during the height of their civilization. Their greatest achievements surrounded them. Their brightest days were unfolding, and somewhere beyond the northern horizon, the earth continued its silent, patient work beneath the island of Thera. Morning arrives with a gentle breeze flowing inland from the sea. The harbors awaken before much of the island, as they often do. You make your way toward the northern coast, where the quiet rhythm of maritime life has begun once again. The first sailors have already untied their vessels from smooth stone quays, pushing them carefully into the calm water before raising square linen sails to catch the light wind. Standing on the shoreline, you watch as the ships glide almost silently across the blue surface of the Aegean. They are not enormous by modern standards, yet for their time they represent remarkable achievements of engineering and experience. Each vessel has been shaped by craftsmen who understand the behavior of wood, rope, sailcloth, and sea. Every plank has been fitted with care. Every rope has been braided to withstand years of salt water and changing weather. The sea is generous, but it is never careless, and neither are the people who depend upon it. One ship prepares for a longer voyage. Its cargo is loaded methodically. Large clay jars filled with fragrant olive oil are secured deep within the hull.
Amphoras containing wine are carefully wrapped to prevent damage. Rolls of finely woven cloth are placed beside painted pottery destined for distant ports. Small chests hold bronze tools, polished stone vessels, and delicate pieces of jewelry crafted by Minoan hands. Nothing is loaded in haste. Experienced merchants know that balance can determine whether a voyage is comfortable or dangerous. The captain walks slowly around the vessel one final time. He inspects every knot, every sail, every oar. Only when everything feels exactly right does he quietly nod to his crew. The voyage begins. You imagine yourself sailing alongside them as Crete slowly fades into the distance. Ahead lie islands scattered across the sea like stepping stones. Some are familiar trading partners. Others are places visited only a few times each year. At every harbor, new languages are heard, different customs are observed, strange foods are tasted. Yet the Minoans have earned a reputation that opens many doors before they even arrive. They are known as dependable traders. They keep their promises. Their pottery is admired. Their metalwork is respected. Their ships are welcomed. This reputation has been built over generations, one honest exchange at a time. Far to the south, Egyptian merchants recognize the painted vessels of Crete almost immediately. Along the coasts of the Levant, traders wait eagerly for ships carrying olive oil and finely woven textiles. On Cyprus, copper miners exchange valuable metal for beautifully crafted goods that only Minoan workshops seem to be able to produce with such elegance. Every successful voyage strengthens an invisible web connecting distant civilizations. Ideas travel alongside cargo, a new style of carving, an unfamiliar musical instrument, different methods of construction, medicinal herbs collected in foreign lands. Even stories cross the sea, changing slightly each time they are told. You begin to realize that the Minoans are not isolated islanders. They are among the great connectors of the ancient Mediterranean. Long before maps accurately describe these waters, experienced captains know the currents by memory. They recognize the color of the sea above hidden reefs. They understand which winds arrive with each season and which harbors offer shelter when storms appear unexpectedly. Their greatest compass is experience. Their greatest guide is observation. Back on Crete, life continues with its familiar steadiness. In the palace storerooms, scribes press fresh symbols into damp clay tablets. Farmers arrive with portions of their harvest to be carefully measured and recorded. Shepherds deliver wool gathered during the spring shearing. Potters inspect newly fired vessels before sending them toward the docks. Every task seems connected to another. Nothing stands alone. The palace depends on the villages depend on the fields depend on the changing seasons, and all of them, in one way or another, depend on the sea. As the afternoon sun begins its slow descent, you climb a gentle hill overlooking both the countryside and the distant coastline. From here, the island appears peaceful beyond measure. Olive groves stretch toward the horizon. White clouds drift lazily across a deep blue sky. Ships appear as tiny silhouettes moving steadily across calm water. It is easy to believe that such prosperity could last forever. The people below certainly hope it will. Generation after generation has watched the same sun rise over the same mountains and set beyond the same sea. Stability has become so familiar that it almost feels eternal. Yet nature does not measure time as people do. Deep beneath the beautiful island of Thera, hidden from every eye above the surface, pressure continues to gather in absolute silence. The earth is patient. It has waited for centuries. It can wait a little longer.
Days pass into weeks, and weeks gently become months. As you remain on Crete, you begin to notice that the rhythm of life is guided not by hurried ambition, but by the steady turning of the seasons. The people do not count success by how quickly a task is completed. Instead, They measure it by whether the work has been done well, whether the harvest is healthy, whether the family is provided for, and whether the community remains at peace. The arrival of spring is welcomed with quiet gratitude. Wildflowers spread across the hillsides in shades of red, yellow, purple, and white. Bees drift lazily from blossom to blossom, collecting nectar that will become fragrant honey. Shepherds lead newborn lambs into fresh pasture, while farmers prepare their fields for another growing season. Everywhere you look, life begins again. The Minoans understand this cycle deeply. Seeds disappear beneath the soil before returning as grain. Leaves fall before new ones emerge. Storms pass, and calm seas always return. Nature teaches patience far better than any teacher ever could. As you walk through the countryside one peaceful morning, you notice small shrines tucked among rocky hills and hidden within quiet groves of trees. Unlike the towering temples that will later dominate other civilizations, these sacred places often feel intimate. A smooth stone, a simple altar, or a small cave may become a place where offerings are left with quiet respect. Many historians believe the Minoans held a deep reverence for the natural world. Mountains, caves, sacred trees, flowing springs, each seems to possess its own quiet importance. You enter one of these cool limestone caves where sunlight filters softly through the entrance before fading into gentle darkness. Water falls drop by drop from the ceiling, echoing through the chamber with a rhythm older than memory itself. Here, worship feels peaceful rather than grand. Clay figurines have been carefully placed upon stone ledges. Small vessels once containing oil or wine rest where ancient hands left them. Someone has scattered fresh flowers near a natural spring. Nothing here suggests fear. Instead, everything speaks of gratitude. Outside, the warm afternoon continues. Back at Knossos, another ceremony is quietly unfolding. Men and women dressed in finely woven garments gather within an open courtyard. Their clothing is bright with colors drawn from nature: deep reds, rich blues, creamy whites, and warm saffron yellows. Bracelets of gold catch the sunlight, while polished beads of carnelian and lapis lazuli reflect soft flashes of color with every movement. Musicians begin to play. The rhythm is slow, steady, comforting. Voices rise together in songs that have been passed from one generation to another. Though their words have been lost to history, their purpose remains easy to imagine. They celebrate the changing seasons, successful harvests, safe voyages, and the quiet blessings that sustain everyday life. You realize that religion here is woven gently into ordinary existence. There is no sharp boundary between the sacred and the familiar. A farmer thanking the earth before planting seeds, a sailor leaving a small offering before beginning a voyage, a family lighting an oil lamp at sunset. Each simple act carries quiet meaning. Nearby, palace artisans continue their work. One painter kneels before a freshly plastered wall. Working while the surface is still damp, he applies pigments made from crushed minerals mixed with water. With calm, confident strokes, dolphins leap across a brilliant blue sea. Their bodies curve naturally, full of movement and grace. Another artist paints lilies swaying gently in an unseen breeze. A third adds delicate swallows circling above rocky cliffs. Very few scenes depict kings seated upon mighty thrones or endless lines of conquered enemies. Instead, beauty itself seems worthy of remembrance. This artistic choice tells you something profound about the Minoan society. They saw wonder in everyday life, in flowers, in birds, in waves, in the simple elegance of nature continuing exactly as it always had. As evening slowly approaches, you climb to a quiet terrace overlooking the sea.
The wind carries the scent of salt and blooming herbs from the surrounding hills. Far below, ships return safely to harbor, their sails glowing golden beneath the setting sun. Everything appears calm. Everything feels secure. Yet somewhere beyond the northern horizon, fishermen sailing between distant islands begin speaking of unusual changes. They mention faint tremors beneath their boats. They describe strange clouds lingering where none had been before. Some even claim that the sea itself has behaved oddly, with unfamiliar currents and waters that seem warmer than expected. Most listeners simply smile politely. The Mediterranean has always been full of mysteries. Clouds come and go. The sea is forever changing. Surely tomorrow will be just as peaceful as today. And so another quiet evening settles over Crete, while deep beneath the island of Thera, hidden beneath layers of rock and ancient volcanic stone, the earth continues its slow and silent work. The reports from the northern sea are soon folded into everyday conversation, then gradually drift towards the edges of memory. Life has a gentle way of returning to its familiar rhythm. When nothing unusual follows a strange event, people naturally assume that everything is as it should be. You notice this everywhere. The marketplace is as lively as ever. Merchants spread colorful fabrics across wooden tables. Potters carefully arrange their newest creations so that the painted dolphins and curling octopuses catch the morning light. The scent of fresh bread mingles with olives, herbs, and warm honey. Neighbors stop to exchange quiet greetings before continuing with the ordinary work of the day. The island feels content. Contentment is a powerful thing. It encourages people to believe that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. For many years on Crete, that belief has seemed entirely reasonable. You leave the marketplace and follow a stone path towards the northern cliffs overlooking the sea. From this height, the Mediterranean stretches endlessly before you, calm enough to mirror the pale blue sky above. Small ships move across the water like drifting leaves, their sails filled with a steady breeze. A sailor standing beside you studies the horizon. He has spent most of his life upon these waters. His face is weathered by sun and salt, his hands rough from rope and timber. He speaks quietly of distant islands, hidden coves, and stars that guide him home during moonless nights. Then he pauses. "There," he says softly, pointing north. At first you see nothing unusual. Then, almost at the edge of sight, you notice a faint gray haze resting above the horizon. It is not shaped like an ordinary cloud, nor does it seem to move with the wind. The sailor narrows his eyes for a few moments before gently shrugging. Perhaps it is dust carried from a distant shore, perhaps morning mist. The sea is full of small mysteries. Soon he returns to his work, and the quiet conversation fades into the sounds of gulls circling overhead. Elsewhere on the island, builders continue repairing sections of older structures that have suffered from previous earthquakes. The Minoans have learned that the earth beneath Crete is never completely still. Small tremors are accepted as part of island life. Stone walls occasionally crack. Roofs sometimes require rebuilding. Columns must be replaced. These tasks no longer surprise anyone. Experience has taught them resilience. Each time the ground has shaken in the past, they have patiently rebuilt. Each generation has inherited not only homes, but the knowledge of how to restore them. This quiet confidence is one of the civilization's greatest strengths. In the palace archives, scribes continue pressing fresh symbols into damp clay tablets. Deliveries of grain are recorded. Olive oil is measured with careful precision. Herds of sheep are counted. Wine from recent harvests is distributed among storerooms. The work is orderly, predictable, comforting. No one writing these records imagines that thousands of years later, archaeologists will carefully brush dust from these same tablets, hoping to understand the lives of the people who created them.
Many of the tablets will survive. The voices themselves will not. As afternoon light softens, you wander through one of Knossos' peaceful courtyards. A gentle fountain trickles into a shallow stone basin. Bright flowers bloom along the edges of the walkway, attracting bees that drift lazily from blossom to blossom. Nearby, young apprentices practice painting fresh plaster. One carefully outlines the graceful curve of a dolphin. Another studies the shape of a lily before attempting to capture its delicate
The night passes in perfect stillness. A cool breeze drifts through the open windows of the Palace of Knossos, carrying with it the scent of olive trees and distant seawater. Oil lamps burn lower with each passing hour until only a few remain, casting soft pools of golden light across painted walls. Most of the island sleeps peacefully. You walk quietly through the silent courtyards. The stone beneath your feet still holds a little warmth from the previous day. Somewhere in the darkness, a fountain continues its gentle rhythm, each drop of water echoing through the sleeping palace. The sound is calming, almost timeless. Beyond the palace, the villages of Crete are equally quiet. Shepherds rest before another day among the hills. Merchants dream of successful voyages. Potters imagine new designs that will soon emerge beneath their careful hands. Nothing suggests that the coming days will be remembered for thousands of years. As dawn approaches, the eastern sky slowly changes from deep blue to pale violet. Birds begin their familiar songs, greeting another beautiful morning exactly as they have done through countless generations. The first farmers step into their fields before the heat of the day arrives. They inspect rows of barley swaying gently in the breeze. Others move among olive groves, checking branches heavy with ripening fruit. The harvest still lies weeks away, yet every tree promises another season of abundance. Along the northern coast, fishermen push their boats into calm water. The sea is unusually smooth. So smooth, in fact, that it almost resembles polished glass. Several older sailors pause to admire the strange stillness. "It will be a good day," one quietly remarks. No one disagrees. Far beyond their sight, however, the island of Thera has entered its final hours of quiet. Deep beneath the mountain, rivers of molten rock force their way upward through chambers that have held them for centuries. The earth groans silently under the growing pressure. Layers of solid stone begin to fracture one after another, though no sound reaches the people of Crete. Nature often gives warnings, but they are rarely understood until afterwards. A flock of seabirds suddenly changes direction, flying rapidly away from the northern horizon. Several dolphins that usually follow fishing boats disappear into deeper water. On rocky hillsides, goats become strangely restless, climbing toward higher ground without encouragement from their shepherds. Most people barely notice. Animals are unpredictable. The sea changes every day. Life continues. Within Knossos, scribes begin another ordinary morning of record-keeping. Fresh clay tablets are placed upon wooden tables. Bundles of reeds are prepared for writing. Deliveries of grain arrive from nearby villages. Large storage jars are opened and inspected before being carefully sealed once more. Every task follows a routine refined over generations. Nearby, artisans continue painting a new fresco. Today, they are adding bright blue fish swimming among red coral and gently waving sea plants. The colors are vivid, filled with the joy and confidence that have become the signature of Minoan art. The painter pauses for a moment, not because of fear, but because the light entering the room seems strangely dim. He steps outside. Looking north, he notices a faint gray band stretching low across the distant horizon. It resembles morning mist, yet it remains in place far longer than mist should. A few others notice it as well.
One merchant suggests it may be smoke from farmers clearing fields on another island. Another believes it is simply an unusual cloud. The conversation ends almost as quickly as it begins. Work resumes. The marketplace grows busier. Children chase one another through the palace courtyards. Musicians rehearse for an evening celebration. The island continues living one ordinary day. Hours pass. The gray band slowly grows wider. Sunlight loses a little of its brightness. Not enough to alarm anyone, only enough for a few people to glance upward with quiet curiosity before returning to their work. None of them can imagine that what they are seeing is the highest reaches of an enormous ash cloud climbing into the atmosphere above Thera. The eruption has begun. Yet on Crete, more than 100 kilometers away, its true scale remains hidden beyond the curve of the Earth. The people continue their day beneath a sky that is changing so gradually that almost no one realizes history has already begun to turn. As the morning stretches toward midday, the island of Crete remains wrapped in an almost unbelievable calm. The marketplace continues to fill with quiet voices, the harbor welcomes returning fishing boats, and smoke rises gently from ovens where fresh bread is being prepared for the afternoon meal. If you had arrived knowing nothing of the world beyond the horizon, you would believe this to be another ordinary day in the long history of the Minoans. Yet nature has already begun writing a different story. Far to the north, the eruption of Thera grows with astonishing force. What began as a towering column of ash has become one of the largest volcanic eruptions of the ancient world. Enormous quantities of rock, ash, and hot gases are hurled high into the atmosphere. The earth trembles beneath the immense pressure until entire sections collapse inward, creating a vast hollow where a mountain once stood. The sound is deafening near the volcano, but distance softens even the greatest roar. On Crete, no one hears it clearly. Instead, strange signs arrive one by one. The sunlight becomes unusually pale, as though a thin veil has been drawn across the sky. Shadows lose their sharp edges. The brilliant blue of the Mediterranean fades into softer shades of gray. You notice people pausing more often now. A merchant looks upward before returning to his stall. A shepherd resting on a hillside studies the northern horizon for several moments. Fishermen exchange quiet remarks while pulling their boats farther onto the beach than they normally would. No one speaks of disaster, only of unusual weather. The Minoans have lived beside an unpredictable sea for generations. Storms appear and disappear. Earthquakes come without warning. Strong winds occasionally delay voyages for days. Most people assume this strange haze belongs to the same familiar pattern of nature. Then the air begins to change. A faint smell, difficult to describe, drifts across the island. It is sharper than sea salt, different from smoke. Some notice it immediately, others barely detect it at all. Children wrinkle their noses before returning to their games. Merchants continue weighing grain. Potters carefully place newly fired vessels outside their kilns to cool in the afternoon breeze. Life refuses to stop. Inside Knossos, palace officials continue discussing future trade expeditions. Ships are expected from Egypt and Cyprus in the coming weeks. Warehouses still hold valuable goods waiting to be exchanged across the Mediterranean. No one yet realizes how deeply those trade routes will soon be disrupted. For generations, the sea has been the bloodline of Minoan prosperity. Now, without warning, it is preparing to become something entirely different. Late in the afternoon, a sailor arrives from a short voyage between nearby islands. His expression is unusually serious. He speaks quietly with the harbor master. The sea, he explains, behaved strangely. The currents shifted without warning. The water seemed unsettled, though no storm was visible.
Birds that normally followed his vessel had vanished. Even the dolphins, so often seen racing beside the bow, were nowhere to be found. The harbor master listens carefully. He has sailed these waters for decades. Experience has taught him that unusual signs deserve respect. Still, there is little he can do. The weather cannot be commanded. The sea cannot be questioned. He simply advises caution and tells the sailors to delay longer journeys until conditions become clearer. As evening approaches, the sky takes on an unfamiliar color. The sunset, usually brilliant with warm oranges and deep reds, appears muted behind a thin curtain of ash drifting high above the Mediterranean. The fading sunlight paints the sea in soft shades of bronze and silver rather than its usual gold. Many people stop to admire the unusual beauty. Few recognize its true cause. The first stars struggle to appear through the hazy sky. Night arrives earlier than expected. Oil lamps are lit throughout villages and palaces alike. Families gather for another evening meal. Stories are shared. Children slowly drift to sleep. The island settles into silence once more. Far beyond the northern horizon, however, the shattered heart of Thera continues to pour ash into the heavens, while beneath the sea,
The night is unusually quiet. Even the gentle sound of waves against the harbor seems softer than before, as though the sea itself has paused to listen. You step outside beneath a sky that is dimmer than it should be. The familiar stars are still there, but many shine through a thin veil stretching across the heavens. The moon, when it rises, appears pale and slightly blurred. Most people simply accept the strange sky. Nature has always held mysteries beyond human understanding. A farmer looks upward only briefly before closing the wooden shutters of his home. A sailor secures the last rope along the dock and wishes his companions a peaceful night. Within the Palace of Knossos, the final lamps are extinguished one after another until only a few guards remain awake. The island sleeps. Far beneath the sea, however, an enormous movement has already begun. When the center of Thera collapsed into the emptied volcanic chamber, the surrounding water rushed inward with unimaginable force. That sudden displacement sent vast waves racing across the Aegean in every direction. They do not resemble the ordinary waves that fishermen know so well. These travel across the open sea with relentless energy. Out in deep water, they are difficult to notice. A passing ship might rise gently, then settle again without understanding what has happened beneath its hull. Only when the waves approach shallow coastlines do they begin to reveal their true power. Before sunrise, fishermen preparing their boats notice something unusual. The tide seems wrong. The water has pulled farther away from the shore than anyone expected. At first, the change is subtle. Then it continues. Minute by minute, the sea keeps retreating. Boats resting in the harbor settle awkwardly against the muddy bottom. Anchors that had been disappeared beneath the waves now lie fully exposed. Fish struggle helplessly in shallow pools left behind as the water withdraws. People begin gathering along the shoreline. Children point toward the exposed rocks with excitement. Some laugh as they collect shells from places that are normally hidden beneath the sea. Older fishermen grow quiet. One slowly removes his cap and continues staring toward the horizon. He has spent his entire life beside these waters. He has never witnessed anything like this. The silence feels unnatural. No gulls cry overhead. The wind has almost disappeared. Even the gentle movement of the waves has vanished. The sea seems to be holding its breath. You notice animals reacting before the people do. Dogs become restless and refuse to approach the shoreline. Goats pull against their ropes, trying to climb toward higher ground. Flocks of birds suddenly rise together into the sky, circling once before flying inland.
Nature senses what human eyes cannot yet understand. Then, from far across the empty water, a deep sound begins to emerge. At first, it is little more than a distant murmur. Some mistake it for thunder beyond the horizon. Others think a storm may finally be approaching. But the sound does not fade. It grows steadily louder. It becomes a continuous roar unlike anything ever heard on the island. Everyone turns toward the sea. Far away, where the water meets the sky, a dark line begins to form. It stretches across the entire horizon. Slowly at first, then with astonishing speed, the line rises higher. It is no ordinary wave. It is the sea itself returning. Fishermen shout warnings. Parents call desperately for their children. Merchants abandon their stalls without a second thought. Those nearest the shore begin running toward higher ground, while others remain frozen in disbelief, struggling to understand what their eyes are witnessing. The approaching wall of water catches the morning sunlight, its crest filled with shattered timber, uprooted trees, broken boats, and countless fragments carried from distant shores. The peaceful Mediterranean that had nourished the Minoan civilization for centuries has become an unstoppable force, and within moments it will reach the coast of Crete. The roar grows louder with every passing heartbeat. It is no longer a distant sound carried by the wind. It fills the air itself, echoing from the cliffs and rolling across the harbors of northern Crete. You can feel it beneath your feet before the great wave arrives, a deep vibration that seems to come from the sea and the earth together. The first people reach higher ground. Others are still running. Parents lift frightened children into their arms. Neighbors grasp the hands of the elderly, urging them onward with calm determination rather than panic. In moments of great danger, the people of Crete do what they have always done. They help one another. The immense wall of water reaches the coastline. It does not crash like an ordinary wave. Instead, it surges forward with relentless force, carrying the weight of an entire sea behind it. Harbor walls disappear beneath foaming water. Fishing boats are lifted high into the air as though they were no heavier than driftwood. Some are thrown against stone quays, breaking apart in a shower of splintered timber. Others are carried far inland, where they come to rest among olive trees and fields that have never before known the touch of the sea. Warehouses filled with grain, olive oil, wine, and painted pottery are overwhelmed in moments. Doors burst open, clay jars tumble across flooded floors, bundles of timber float through streets that only minutes earlier had been dry beneath the morning sun. The water pushes inland with astonishing speed, following river valleys and low ground before gradually losing its strength. Then, almost as suddenly as it arrived, it begins to withdraw. It carries much of the island's labor back toward the sea. Broken beams, fragments of pottery, fishing nets, pieces of roofs, even entire sections of wooden docks vanish beneath the receding current. When the water finally settles, an unfamiliar silence spreads across the coast. The familiar sounds of merchants bargaining, fishermen calling to one another, and children laughing have been replaced by quiet voices searching for loved ones. Smoke no longer rises from every hearth. Some homes remain standing, others have disappeared completely. You walk carefully through one of the damaged harbors. Mud covers the streets, seaweed hangs from broken walls, large stones that once formed sturdy piers have been scattered as though they were ordinary pebbles. Yet even here, amid the destruction, signs of resilience begin to appear. Neighbors clear fallen beams together, families gather whatever food can be saved, carpenters inspect damaged buildings, already discussing how they might be repaired. The Minoans have lived with earthquakes throughout their history. They know that rebuilding is part of life. Before long, messengers travel inland toward Knossos. The palace itself has escaped the flooding because it stands well above the coast,
But news of the disaster arrives quickly. Officials gather in the great central court, listening as exhausted runners describe shattered harbors, damaged villages, and missing ships. The reports are difficult to believe. For generations, the sea has been the source of Crete's prosperity. Now it has become the cause of unimaginable loss. Still, the palace does not fall into chaos. Storerooms are opened, grain is distributed to affected communities, olive oil, dried figs, and wine are loaded onto carts, bound for the northern settlements. Skilled builders, stonemasons, and carpenters are sent wherever they are needed most. The organization that once supported trade now serves another purpose. It helps the island recover. Days pass, the floodwaters disappear, leaving behind layers of mud and broken timber. People begin repairing homes. Boats that can still be saved are pulled from the fields and carefully restored. Fields are cleared, roads are reopened. Children gradually return to their games, though many now glance toward the sea more often than before. The Minoans endure. They mourn those they have lost, but they continue planting, building, trading, and living. Their civilization is not erased in a single day. Yet something invisible has changed. The confidence that the sea would always provide has been quietly shaken. Beyond the horizon, the eruption of Thera continues to send ash into the sky, and across the Mediterranean, trade routes that had connected distant civilizations for centuries begin to falter. The island of Crete still stands. Its people still possess remarkable skill, creativity, and determination. But the age of effortless prosperity has come to an end, and a new chapter in the story of the Minoans is only beginning.
The roar grows louder with every passing heartbeat. It is no longer a distant sound carried by the wind. It fills the air itself, echoing from the cliffs and rolling across the harbors of northern Crete. You can feel it beneath your feet before the great wave arrives, a deep vibration that seems to come from the sea and the earth together. The first people reach higher ground. Others are still running. Parents lift frightened children into their arms. Neighbors grasp the hands of the elderly, urging them onward with calm determination rather than panic. In moments of great danger, the people of Crete do what they have always done. They help one another. The immense wall of water reaches the coastline. It does not crash like an ordinary wave. Instead, it surges forward with relentless force, carrying the weight of an entire sea behind it. Harbor walls disappear beneath foaming water. Fishing boats are lifted high into the air as though they were no heavier than driftwood. Some are thrown against stone quays, breaking apart in a shower of splintered timber. Others are carried far inland, where they come to rest among olive trees and fields that have never before known the touch of the sea. Warehouses filled with grain, olive oil, wine, and painted pottery are overwhelmed in moments. Doors burst open, clay jars tumble across flooded floors. Bundles of timber float through streets that only minutes earlier had been dry beneath the morning sun. The water pushes inland with astonishing speed, following river valleys and low ground before gradually losing its strength. Then, almost as suddenly as it arrived, it begins to withdraw. It carries much of the island's labor back toward the sea. Broken beams, fragments of pottery, fishing nets, pieces of roofs, even entire sections of wooden docks vanish beneath the receding current. When the water finally settles, an unfamiliar silence spreads across the coast. The familiar sounds of merchants bargaining, fishermen calling to one another, and children laughing have been replaced with quiet voices searching for loved ones. Smoke no longer rises from every hearth. Some homes remain standing, others have disappeared completely. You walk carefully through one of the damaged harbors. Mud covers the streets. Seaweed hangs from broken walls. Large stones that once formed sturdy piers have been scattered as though they were ordinary pebbles.
Yet even here, amid the destruction, signs of resilience begin to appear. Neighbors clear fallen beams together. Families gather whatever food can be saved. Carpenters inspect damaged buildings, already discussing how they might be repaired. The Minoans have lived with earthquakes throughout their history. They know that rebuilding is part of life. Before long, messengers travel inland toward Knossos. The palace itself has escaped the flooding because it stands well above the coast, but news of the disaster arrives quickly. Officials gather in the great central court, listening as exhausted runners describe shattered harbors, damaged villages, and missing ships. The reports are difficult to believe. For generations, the sea has been the source of Crete's prosperity. Now, it has become the cause of unimaginable loss. Still, the palace does not fall into chaos. Storerooms are opened. Grain is distributed to affected communities. Olive oil, dried figs, and wine are loaded onto carts bound for the northern settlements. Skilled builders, stonemasons, and carpenters are sent wherever they are needed most. The organization that once supported trade now serves another purpose. It helps the island recover. Days pass. The floodwaters disappear, leaving behind damaged harbors, broken warehouses, and fields covered with layers of sand and silt. Yet the island is far from silent. Everywhere you travel, the sound of rebuilding fills the air. Stonemasons return to their hammers. Carpenters shape fresh beams from cypress and cedar. Potters gather new clay from riverbanks, replacing vessels that were lost to the sea. The work is steady, methodical. Hope rarely arrives all at once. More often, it is built one stone at a time. You walk through a coastal village where nearly every family has suffered some loss. A fisherman whose boat was carried inland now works beside his neighbors to repair another vessel. An elderly woman carefully sweeps mud from the doorway of her home, pausing only to smile at children who chase one another through the street, as if reminding the adults that life continues. No one speaks loudly, but neither does anyone surrender to despair. This quiet resilience becomes one of the greatest strengths of the Minoans. At Knossos, the palace remains a center of organization. Courtyards once busy with merchants now receive delegations from villages across the island. Messengers arrive throughout the day carrying reports from distant settlements. Scribes continue pressing symbols into damp clay, but the records have changed. Instead of documenting prosperous shipments bound for foreign ports, they now record damaged storehouses, missing livestock, and supplies sent to communities in need. The palace responds with remarkable efficiency. Grain stored during years of abundance is carefully measured and distributed. Olive oil is poured into transport jars. Bronze tools are issued to builders restoring damaged homes. The careful planning that once strengthened trade now helps sustain an entire island through hardship. You begin to appreciate why the Minoans invested so much effort in their storerooms and record-keeping. Their system was not merely a symbol of wealth, it was a source of stability. Without those carefully managed reserves, recovery would have been far more difficult. Even so, challenges continue to appear. Many harbors remain damaged. Some channels have filled with debris. Ships that survived the waves require extensive repairs before they can safely return to sea. For merchants whose lives depended upon regular voyages, uncertainty becomes an unfamiliar companion. Across the eastern Mediterranean, other trading partners face similar difficulties. Ash from the eruption has reached distant lands. Navigation becomes more difficult beneath hazy skies. In some regions, harvests suffer as sunlight is briefly reduced and weather patterns shift. Trade does not disappear, but it slows. Routes that once seemed dependable become unpredictable. A voyage that normally required only a few days may now take much longer, interrupted by damaged ports or cautious captains unwilling to take unnecessary risks.
You accompany one such captain as he prepares his restored ship for its first journey since the disaster. Before departure, he walks the length of the vessel in silence. His hands rest briefly upon the mast. He checks every rope, every sail, every wooden peg securing the hull. Experience has taught him that confidence is valuable. Overconfidence is dangerous. When the ship finally leaves the harbor, no cheering crowd gathers to celebrate. Instead, those watching simply offer quiet waves and hopeful smiles. Everyone understands the importance of this voyage. If trade begins to recover, so too will much of the island's prosperity. As the vessel disappears beyond the headland, you notice something subtle. The sailors glance toward the northern horizon more often than they once did. The sea has not changed its beauty. Its surface still sparkles beneath the afternoon sun. Its waves still roll gently against the shore. Yet it now carries a memory, a reminder that even the calmest waters possess unimaginable power. The Minoans continue to live beside the Mediterranean. They continue to respect it, but they no longer trust it quite as completely as before. And while Crete slowly rebuilds, another civilization across the sea watches these changes with growing interest. On the Greek mainland, the Mycenaeans are becoming stronger with each generation. Their ships sail farther, their ambitions quietly grow. The balance of power within the Aegean is beginning to shift, almost unnoticed, like the slow turning of the seasons. In the weeks that follow, the people of Crete settle into a different rhythm. The urgency of the first days slowly gives way to patient determination. The floodwaters have withdrawn, leaving behind damaged harbors, broken warehouses, and fields covered with layers of sand and silt. Yet the island is far from silent. Everywhere you travel, the sound of rebuilding fills the air. Stone masons return to their hammers. Carpenters shape fresh beams from cypress and cedar. Potters gather new clay from riverbanks, replacing vessels that were lost to the sea. The work is steady, methodical. Hope rarely arrives all at once. More often, it is built one stone at a time. You walk through a coastal village where nearly every family has suffered some loss. A fisherman whose boat was carried inland now works beside his neighbors to repair another vessel. An elderly woman carefully sweeps mud from the doorway of her home, pausing only to smile at children who chase one another through the street, as if reminding the adults that life continues.
The seasons continue their quiet procession across the island. Spring gives way to summer. Summer softens into autumn. The olives are gathered once again, vineyards are harvested, and sheep return from the high pastures as cooler winds begin to sweep across the mountains of Crete. From a distance, life appears almost unchanged. Villages remain busy. Markets still welcome merchants. The Palace of Knossos continues to oversee the careful movement of grain, oil, wool, and pottery. Yet beneath this familiar rhythm, subtle changes are unfolding. You begin to notice that fewer ships arrive from certain distant ports. Some merchants who once visited every season now appear only occasionally. Others send smaller cargoes than before. Conversations in the marketplace increasingly include words like caution, uncertainty, and delay. No single event causes these changes. Rather, they accumulate quietly, year after year. The eruption of Thera did not erase the Minoan civilization in a single moment. Instead, it weakened the network that had supported its remarkable prosperity. Damaged harbors required years of repair. Trade routes became less reliable. Neighboring kingdoms, facing their own challenges, began forging new partnerships that no longer depended entirely upon Crete. Across the Aegean, another society had been watching carefully. On the mainland of Greece, the Mycenaeans continued to grow in confidence and strength. Their settlements expanded into impressive citadels surrounded by massive stone walls. Skilled metal workers forged excellent bronze weapons and tools, while their merchants reached farther across the Mediterranean with each passing generation. You imagine standing upon the walls of one of these mainland strongholds.
From there, the sea no longer appears as a distant mystery. It appears as an opportunity. The Mycenaeans admired much of what the Minoans had achieved. They appreciated their craftsmanship, their artistry, and their experience as sailors. Trade between the two cultures continued, and with every passing decade, the influence of mainland Greece quietly spread across the islands of the Aegean. Back on Crete, the Palace of Knossos remained active. Its storerooms still contained great clay jars filled with oil, wine, and grain. Scribes continued pressing symbols into fresh clay tablets. Artisans painted graceful frescoes upon newly repaired walls. Musicians filled the courtyards during festivals, while priests carried out ceremonies that had been practiced for generations. To an ordinary visitor, the civilization still appeared prosperous. Yet history often changes beneath the surface long before it becomes visible. Around the middle of the 15th century BCE, many of Crete's great palace centers were destroyed. Archaeologists continue to study these events with great care. Some evidence points toward powerful earthquakes that shook the island once more. Other discoveries suggest conflict involving the rising Mycenaean world. It is possible that several different causes unfolded over many years rather than during a single catastrophe. The Earth leaves clues, but it rarely tells the entire story. Knossos endured longer than the other great palaces. For a time, it remained the island's most important center. Eventually, however, the palace began operating under Mycenaean administration. One of the clearest signs of this transformation appears not in its architecture, but in its writing. The elegant symbols of linear A gradually disappear from official records. In their place appears linear B, an early form of written Greek used by Mycenaean scribes. The clay tablets continue. The storerooms continue. The storerooms continue. The daily work continues. But the voices preserving those records have changed. Cultures do not always vanish. Sometimes they gently merge with those that follow. As you walk once more through the corridors of Knossos, you notice familiar murals still glowing with scenes of dolphins, lilies, and flowing waves. The beauty remains. The craftsmanship remains. Yet the island has entered a new chapter. The age in which the Minoans stood as the dominant power of the Aegean is quietly drawing to a close, not with a single dramatic ending, but with the slow turning of history, as one civilization gently gives way to another. Time continues its gentle journey, carrying every generation a little farther from the world that came before. The people living on Crete do not wake one morning and announce that the Minoan civilization has ended. There is no single farewell, no final ceremony within the Palace of Knossos, and no one closes its great doors for the last time with the knowledge that an age has passed. Instead, life changes quietly, year after year. Children grow into adults who remember fewer of the old traditions than their parents once did. Craftsmen continue shaping clay, but their designs slowly begin to reflect new influences from the Greek mainland. Scribes still press symbols into damp clay, though they now write in linear B rather than the older linear A. Merchants continue to sail the sea, yet the great network once centered on Crete has shifted toward new powers across the Aegean. The island remains beautiful. The mountains stand unchanged. Olive trees continue producing fruit exactly as they always have. The sea still washes gently against the rocky coastline, caring little for the rise or fall of kingdoms. Gradually, the magnificent palaces become quieter. Some rooms are no longer repaired after storms. Wooden beams weather beneath rain and sun. Painted plaster begins to loosen from the walls. Bright colors that once celebrated dolphins, lilies, and graceful dancers slowly fade beneath layers of dust. Nature, patient as ever, begins reclaiming the places that people once filled with music and conversation. The silence is not sad. It is peaceful. The earth accepts every civilization with the same quiet patience. Centuries pass. The names of kings are forgotten. The voices of merchants disappear. The songs sung during Minoan festivals fade into memory. Yet stories have a remarkable way of surviving even when history grows faint. Generations later, Greek storytellers speak of a wise ruler named King Minos. They tell tales of a vast labyrinth hidden beneath a magnificent palace, a place so intricate that few who entered could find their way out. Within that maze, they imagine the fearsome Minotaur, a creature unlike any found in the natural world. These stories are myths, woven from imagination rather than history. Yet many historians believe they may preserve distant echoes of something real. The sprawling corridors of Knossos, with their countless rooms, staircases, and passageways, could easily have inspired travelers who struggled to describe such an extraordinary place. Over generations, memories became legends, and legends became some of the most enduring tales of the ancient Greek world. Then more than 3,000 years pass.
The palaces lie hidden beneath layers of earth and stone. Olive trees continue growing above them. Shepherds guide their flocks across hills that conceal forgotten walls. The world changes many times over. Empires rise. Empires fall. Still, the ruins wait in silence. At the beginning of the 20th century, archaeologists carefully uncover the buried remains of Knossos. As dust is brushed away from ancient walls, vivid frescoes begin to emerge once more. Dolphins seem to swim again across brilliant blue plaster. Staircases lead downward into rooms untouched for thousands of years. Clay tablets, carefully baked by accidental fires long ago, still preserve the records of a civilization whose spoken language has almost entirely vanished. Today, as your journey gently comes to an end, you stand once more upon a quiet hill overlooking the island of Crete. The afternoon sun bathes the landscape in warm, golden light. The same mountains watch over the valleys. The same sea reflects the endless sky. The same breeze moves softly through ancient olive groves. The Minoans may no longer walk these paths, but their legacy remains. In every painted dolphin, in every carefully shaped clay vessel, in every stone corridor of Knossos, in every story that continues to be told. Their civilization reminds you that greatness does not always announce itself through conquest or war. Sometimes it is found in peaceful trade, patient craftsmanship, curiosity about the wider world, and a deep respect for nature's rhythms. And as evening slowly settles over Crete, the island grows quiet once again. The waves continue their endless conversation with the shore. The wind whispers through the olive trees. Above, countless stars appear one by one, just as they did when Minoan sailors looked to the heavens to guide them safely home. You leave the island with the comforting thought that although civilizations rise and fall, the stories they leave behind continue to drift across time, gentle as the sea, enduring as the mountains, and peaceful enough to accompany one last restful sleep.